Hello and welcome back to Exothermic Plays Games. I'm Exothermic and the date today is Saturday, November 23rd, 2024. I've been doing a daily countdown of my 366 favorite video games of all time through each day of the year, and coming in at number 39 is Bravely Default. Despite everything you're about to hear and see, I would like to remind you that this is not a Final Fantasy game. It's published by Square Enix, and the producer on the game also produced all of the DS 3D remakes of the older Final Fantasy titles, with character designs from the guy that made the character designs for Final Fantasy Tactics. And that all shines through every step of the way here, with shared things like the job system and the importance of crystals to the story and the equipment system. There's loads of stuff, but there's also a lot of things that really stand out as defining the game as something new, and those are the things that pushed Bravely Default pretty high up on the rankings. In fact, despite the similarities they have, Bravely Default really emphasizes the differences, making it one of the most interesting and unique JRPGs I've ever played, earning a spot higher than all of the Nintendo-era Final Fantasies. I'm going to have to explain some of the narrative here so I can talk about the thing that makes it amazing, and is one of the driving forces for why I love this game so much, so buckle in. While I think the plot devices used are essential to understanding the ranking here fully, if you'd rather not get those spoilers and just check out the combat and other mechanics, you can go look at the timestamps in the description to head that way. On to the thing. The game starts off showcasing your four main protagonists, each leading very different lives, sometimes even on opposite sides of a great military conflict. Agnes Oblige is the Vestal of Wind, and her job is basically to ensure the strength and security of the Wind Crystal. The thing that kicks off the story here is that all four crystals, Wind, Water, Earth, and Fire, are corrupted and taken offline by some mysterious darkness. It's catastrophic, and it's horrible. Ring-a-Bell is a man shrouded in mystery and an absolute absence of tact. Wow, that guy will just say whatever. He's suffering from severe amnesia and looking for a woman that's referenced in a strange journal of his. Next is Adia Lee, daughter of the Grand Marshal of the Eternian military, intent on proving herself worthy of her lineage, bound by a strong sense of duty. The Eternian forces are currently engaged in war against the kingdom of Kaldisla, and much of their ideology is rooted in anti-crystalism, basically the belief that the crystals aren't important anymore and the people can live their lives without them via science and technology. Eternia's super wrong, though, because when all four crystals fall, the world starts falling apart. Tiz Ariar is a fairly unremarkable citizen of Kaldisla when his hometown of Narende is suddenly swallowed up by the Earth Crystal's failure. Tragically, he is the only survivor as he failed to save his younger brother. After being found and rescued by a member of the King's Guard, he sets back out to investigate the crater where his town once stood. Upon his arrival, he discovers Agnes, who journeyed there to survey the destruction in her quest to figure out how to save the crystals, starting with her own. Unfortunately for them both, she was followed and is being hunted by Eternian agents. The tone of the game definitely leans more towards comedy and dialogue, contrasting serious events happening in the plot. It's charming and fun, though some moments are a little too heavy-handed, I think, especially regarding Ring-a-Bell's flirtatious nature. Speaking of Ring-a-Bell, after you meet with the King of Kaldisla, you run into the dude, and he insists on joining your party, because his book says he does. The journal he carries is missing many pieces of information, but has what seems to be almost a prophetic nature with clues to what your party will endure. After gaining access to Ring a Bell, you can even read this journal, though it's very cryptic with a ton of missing context. You'll of course discover this context over the course of the game, and it's one of the most genius things the game does with its narrative. In your efforts to find a way to get back to the Wind Crystal, you stop an Eternian force from sieging the kingdom, and from the atrocities they are committing, like burning people alive and all sorts of crazy stuff. Edea defects to join your crew. The party is assembled. Interestingly, Edea is the woman that Ring a Bell has been looking for. He recognizes her voice and her face, but does not seem to know her actually at all, only that he is madly in love with her in ways that he cannot explain. The rest of this part of the game is adventuring throughout the world, working to cleanse the crystals of their corruption. There's whole sequences of appeasing local leadership to gain access to the crystals, outrunning the Eternian forces that are hunting you down, looking for special items deep within ancient dungeons, and doing everything necessary to prepare Agnes for the rites of cleansing to save the world. Aiding you in all of these tasks is Aerie, the worst named character in any game ever. She's a fairy. Yes, Aerie the fairy. It's the worst. Anyways, Aerie is perhaps the most interesting character in this whole game once you get past her name. She knows a whole lot about how all of this works and seems pretty pushy. The first sense I got that something was off about Aerie was the first time we cleansed the Wind Crystal. Oh yes, I said the first time, didn't I? The first time you save the world, there's a crazy sequence that plays out and you wake up again, back where you started. The world is not saved. The events you just spent a ton of hours progressing through have not happened. At first it appears that you traveled back in time, but in actuality, you traveled to an alternate universe where things are mostly the same, but not quite. You go through 5 runs of the game to see it all the way through to the end, although you can actually, as a secret thing, secret thing, during the 3rd run, at some point, you can start, at any point when you're cleansing a crystal, you can actually just keep going when Aerie tells you to stop, and you overload the crystal, and it'll shatter, and then you basically skip to the end fight of the game. You miss a lot of story doing it that way, but it's crazy that you can do it, and that's super cool. But each time you go, you learn more and more about the party as they retain their memories through each loop, and you also learn more and more about the enemies you face off against. Like how some of the bosses you thought were certainly evil are actually trying to help you, but by protecting you from darker forces. Or the secret of Ring a Bell's original identity before his amnesia, which is how his strange journal came to be, is it was his own from yet a previous alternate world. Of course, the main thing you'll discover through multiple repetitions of this adventure is what you're really doing with all of these crystals and the true origin of the threat upon them. I love this gimmick, and the first time it happened, I was not at all expecting it. At first, I was worried about doing the whole story again, but you can kind of expedite it with the party's foreknowledge of the journey ahead. The bosses, however, change with each universe, getting both stronger, but also playing out differently narratively. The whole thing is excellent, and the main thing making the game feel so unique. The other thing, however, which I cannot understate how cool it is the combat. Much of the game is a pretty straightforward turn-based combat, except for the parts that very much are not. The name of the game is derived from this combat system, where you can stack uses of Brave or Default once. Each character, both friendly and opposing, have a number of turns available to them. You can dip into the negatives even, but have to pass on your turns automatically until you're back to a positive. You can take up to 4 turns worth of actions at a time by using the Brave ability. The way you build up these turns is by taking the default action, allowing you to stack up to 3 turns. What makes this work so well is that default also functions as a defensive mechanism, making it so you take less damage that round. On top of that system, you also learn something called sleep points from having the 3DS in sleep mode over time. These function like your regular action points, but are separate, and you can use them for one character at a time at any time, even stopping the clock and everything else going on in the game to do them in the middle of an opponent's attack. The strategic flexibility this system provides you is incredible, allowing you to have a general plan to build up charges and then dump them and then build them up again, while also panic doing things, like rounds of big healing in reaction to attacks from enemies. Or you can even have some characters be very conservative, and while simultaneously having others set up for wombo combos and going all out. A lot of these decisions will also be tied to the jobs and roles you set up for each character. The game utilizes a job system like many Final Fantasy games. As you beat bosses representing one of 24 jobs for the first time, you gain access to that job as well. Each job has its own level, and as a character levels up in that job, they gain access to newer and better abilities. Each character can also equip a secondary job's main ability set, and spend points to select from passive bonuses earned on any job they've done. The customization for each character's toolkit is fantastic, and only gets better the longer the game goes on. As an easy example of a wombo combo, the monk job has an ability that's a self-buff to your attack, but only for 2 rounds, including the one you're in at that moment. I'm going to make up some numbers for easy math to make it easier to follow, but this is like how it works. Let's say each attack you do does 10 damage. You can stack this buff, increasing your damage for those 2 rounds by 25% each time, so you're doing 50% bonus damage on the rest of your attacks. So you can have a monk attack 4 times, twice in a row, burning defaulted action points, and then going into action point debt from another set of 4. That would deal 80 damage there. But if you buff yourself twice, then attack twice for 15 damage each, and then do another set of 4 attacks at 15 damage each, you actually do 90 damage, squeezing out another 12.5% damage output from that character. That's just a really easy example of how you can scale your aggressive and defensive tendencies, but things can get really intricate as you unlock more jobs and combine different sets of abilities that maybe weren't originally designed to work together to do some really cool stuff. There's 24 jobs in the game, and while you'll gain access to many of them naturally throughout the story, there's also side quests you can do, giving you some more unique things. Like the merchant job, earned by taking down Nestle. A monopolistic business mogul that exploits the basic need of water into an unprecedented environmental crisis for its lack of availability to make money hand over fist despite blatant human rights violations.
What is it you are?
Yeah. So basically, you can win fights by just throwing more money at them, so I guess it is Nestle after all. Oops. Woo. The game is overall filled with little extra things to do, like rebuilding Tiz's hometown, providing expanded merchant options and avenues to get special items that help with niche combat applications, or social features playing off of the 3DS's Street Pass functionality, essentially being able to borrow other people's characters for one action at a time. The quality of life features, however, are terrific. You can adjust the pace of combat on the fly, just making it go real fast, using the D-pad, and can drastically change the appearance rate of random encounters, even to the point of turning them off entirely when you just need to get to, from A to B, or having a new encounter every couple of steps if you really need to grind. The game is thoughtfully crafted, with a narrative that brilliantly marries game mechanics with its story. A colorful and memorable cast made up of extremely dynamic characters, all the way down to even the early antagonists that at first blush seem to be one-dimensional throwaway lackeys, but then you find out there's a bit more to them. The combat is engaging and full of rich depth that is rarely, maybe never, found in turn-based systems. It all combines to be a remarkable, unique experience that riffs on feelings of nostalgia while simultaneously crafting something entirely its own. Join me tomorrow as I talk about my 38th favorite game, where I play a different game that's kind of a Final Fantasy, while also kind of not being a Final Fantasy. This one at least has it in the title, though.
Of course we are. I'm